The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, here with Sam. As always, Sam, how are you doing?
6-0 in the Kevin Durant era. Mike, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
6-0 in the Kevin Durant era, and 5 in a row, which includes 2 games that Kevin Durant did not play in. Current, I believe, the longest win streak in the NBA currently. And they're playing well. I mean, capped off with the OKC game, Durant finally played against OKC with the Suns. There was 3 chances. This was his third and final chance, and he did. 35 points by Kevin Durant. I think maybe his best game. The other one that you could put against that is the Dallas game, where he was pretty remarkable in that game as well. He had 37, I think. Pretty amazing game by him there. But yeah, an awesome game. How's it felt? Like it finally feels like Durant's on the team, right? It's like we got a brief glimpse of it, and then it just went away. And now it's like, oh yeah, he really is.
Yeah, definitely in the past week. Let's see. So he played those 3 games initially, then went out, obviously, as we all know. When he came back, first game was against Minnesota, and he struggled. He had an outlier performance. I think everyone's been right about casting that kind of performance to the side. It was the second game since his return. So who did we play after Minnesota? It was
Denver.
That Denver
That's the game I was at. Yeah.
That was the game you were at. And that was the first game where I was still kind of having those thoughts of, oh shit, Kevin Durant's on the team and he makes everything look easy, because he was playing well, but I don't remember how many he even scored in that game. Like 30.
Yeah.
But it was an effort.
An easy 30, yeah.
Exactly. It was an effortless 30. And granted, this is maybe the other greater point of the week. We're winning these games. We're not exactly steamrolling the competition, and we played a very short-handed Denver team. So say what you will about that. We'll have another chance against them coming up very soon. Hopefully they'll be at full strength, and hopefully they give us a good game. But just, for the first time in the past game or two, it's really kind of felt firmly solidified in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, this is Kevin Durant. He's on the Suns. These are all the ways we can plug him in XYZ into all our various sets. And it's not perfect yet, but it works. We know that it works, and we know what the net rating is now. In fact, I have it right on hand if you're interested, of when the most important guys, the 4 most important guys on this roster share the floor. It's a small sample size, but it says that the Suns look damn good as we expected them to look, and that should give you a lot of confidence going into the playoffs now, or going into the final stretch.
It's basically plus 20, right? That's the stat you have, I imagine. Plus 19.9?
Plus, we're plus 22, plus 22.9, a 123 offensive rating, and basically a 100 defensive rating in 122 minutes. And of course, the 4 guys I'm talking about, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton. So right, they look good.
If you plug a Kogi into that, it's a 19.9 net rating, and the defensive rating is 95 with the starting 5. How crazy is that? 95. Yeah, mind you, it's 6 games. None of them like real contenders, really. I think Dallas was playing better at the time. Chicago is actually one of the best teams in the last 20, 25 games. So, say what you will about Chicago full season, but at that point they were playing pretty well. And then OKC in this most recent one, maybe the best team, and Minnesota playing well too, actually.
Minnesota too. I mean, look, I think it's important to note, people can say, okay, we're not beating contenders. We're not beating bottom feeders either here. I say as we're about to go in and play San Antonio tomorrow. That's
Denver was the only one, really, right? And they actually played well with their
Denver played a bum squad. But OKC has been solid. Chicago, Minnesota, Dallas, these are not world beaters, but we essentially beat a slew of mediocre opponents. And
just to be clear, the Dallas game the Suns played was the start of their collapse, not the middle of it.
Right. Yes, that's a good point, too.
Yeah, they were playing at that time, yeah.
As we prepare for the playoffs, I think maybe if we have time at the end of this episode, we'll kind of run through who the 5 potential opponents are for the first round. But all of those teams are kind of various degrees of mediocre too. That's not to say that they don't pose threats. That's just firmly kind of pointing out what their literal win-loss records are on the season and kind of how we've gotten to this point where every team in the Western Conference outside of 3 of them are basically 500 going into the playoffs, which is, again, unheard of. Yes, there's a lot of parity. Yes, there are a lot of threats in this conference. We've also never seen a Western Conference like this before. And so all you really need is kind of this 5 or 6 game win streak a little bit more if they can manage it going into the playoffs. And you feel like you've got some good momentum right now compared to the rest of the conference.
I think you mentioned it. It's not perfect so far. And I think that's like the lasting thing that stuck with me from not just these last 3 games, but including the first 3 games as well. The first 3 games arguably went, I would say, even better than these recent 3 games, the Charlotte game notwithstanding. But they're not quite there yet. And I think part of the reason they're not quite there yet, and I'm talking offensively because I think there's not a lot you can complain about defensively. They've been really good defensively recently. But they just, like OKC, for example, sending 2 guys at Devin Booker before he even got to half court and just forcing the ball out of his hands to start the possession. How could you have possibly predicted that a team would do that with both Booker and Durant on the floor? I think there's going to be so many teams trying to figure out anything that they could possibly do to defend the Suns when they have both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on the floor at the same time. And I think the Suns have to find ways to react to that because there's only so much you could predict. That's not something I would have predicted. There have been so many times, I think, in the last few games and in the first 3 games where one of those 2 guys has sat open for 5, 6, 7 seconds in a possession. And the Suns players, mostly Chris Paul, Cameron Payne, are just not used to finding guys that are that wide open. When Kevin Durant's on one side of the floor, Devin Booker's on the other side of the floor, there's a good chance that at some point during that possession, one of them is going to be open because they're going to cheat off of one of them to help guard the other guy. And the extent to which the offense is still figuring itself out it's pretty dramatic considering they're still winning. I mean, they've won every single game that Kevin Durant has played, and they still have another 2 gears they can get to this offense.
No doubt, and it's just going to be a process, possession by possession almost, of figuring out what the defense is throwing at you. You're completely right. The Thunder doubling Booker while Kevin Durant and even Chris Paul, while they're both still on the floor, is completely counterintuitive to what we would have expected. And yet, it was kind of, I don't know if genius might be a little bit dramatic, but it mucked up the game. It got
at the very least, the Suns weren't expecting it. Right. They weren't expecting it. So it forced them to think a little bit. Yeah.
And it forced them into some difficult live ball turnovers. And we saw, this wasn't the reason this happened, but we saw live ball turnovers being kind of the issue that the Suns struggled with in that Denver game, as well the reason that Denver was able to get back into that game. And it went from being a 27-point Suns lead, I think in the early third quarter, all the way down to they were playing clutch time minutes before they had to figure it out against this group of C or D squad players that Denver had trotted out. So yeah, they're still figuring it out. On the other end of the spectrum, though, you talk about Kevin Durant on one side of the court, Devin Booker on the other. We've seen the Suns at their best in that game against OKC going to a set that we've talked about so much over the years, like double drag, where traditionally it's been Chris Paul on the ball. They can hide Devin Booker in various places in that set. Ayton is at least one of the screeners, but particularly going to that set 3 or 4 times in a row in the fourth quarter last night, except the difference being that Kevin Durant was in the corner. And just using Kevin Durant as this decoy in the corner and leveraging all of the gravity that he has, suddenly the entire floor opened up. He actually hit 2 corner threes in a row, which he basically never gets corner threes. Our Australian correspondent friend David has pointed that out on his Twitter. Kevin Durant basically never takes corner threes throughout his career. In fact, there are entire seasons where he's gone the entire season making 0 or even 1 corner three from the left corner, at least, throughout the entire season. Last night he had 2 in a row. Then the Suns come down 24 seconds later, run the play a third time in a row. And what happens this time? They overplay on KD. They want to recover out to the shooter. And suddenly the middle is wide open. DeAndre Ayton had set the screen. and he gets a wide open dunk. Maybe it was a layup. I can't remember. But,
Yeah.
we're starting
right at the rim,
to
wide
see,
open. Yeah.
We're seeing the pieces play off each other in real time. But it is taking some time. And that's also, that's with OKC maybe playing a bit more of a traditional defense where they're going to be forced into these difficult situations.
Well, and I think double drag, and for those who don't know exactly what double drag is, it's essentially Chris Paul at the top of the key. Both DeAndre, and in this particular game, this was the formation of it. Both DeAndre and Devin Booker set staggered screens for Chris Paul, and then one of them rolls, one of them pops, basically. And you know which one's rolling, which one's popping in that scenario. DeAndre Ayton's rolling, Devin Booker's popping out to the top of the wing. And it forces guys to make decisions because oftentimes the guy can't really fight over to guard Chris Paul because there's multiple screens, there's confusion. Somebody comes off the corner to cover the rim with DeAndre Ayton rolling, and that's how Kevin Durant got back-to-back corner threes in that specific game. But the extent to which that has been their closing play, the hammer that they kind of run at the end of the game, instead of Spain, which is what they normally do, stack, or what we've learned recently Monty calls middle third pick and roll. They have their own terminology. I think it makes a lot of sense because it involves, in some ways, all four of those guys instead of just three of them. Because you put Kevin Durant in the strong side corner, you still have DeAndre Ayton involved. If you try to run Spain more traditionally, oftentimes the help doesn't necessarily come off the corners. It's really more for Devin Booker at the top of the key than it is for anyone else, or a Chris Paul mid-range shot. Maybe Durant's not involved, or maybe you use Durant and Booker as the screeners in Spain, and then DeAndre Ayton's not involved, right? Because I think the best formation of Spain, if they do end up running it, probably is where Durant and Booker are the screeners. You never know who's rolling, who's going to pop, or what's going to happen in that scenario. So the extent to which they're going to run double drag at the end of games when they're trying to finally close out a game, I think I didn't anticipate it was going to be as much as it was. 4 times in a row is what they actually ran last night. 2 threes, a DeAndre Ayton dunk, and then OKC took a timeout. The Suns tried it one more time, and they got a turnover out of that one. So 8 points total in 4 plays, basically scoring an average of 2 points per possession in those plays.
It's a perfect play. At least in that very limited, very small sample size.
Chris Paul is an important part of it, too. I want to remind people. I think
very
he's
much
being forgotten in some of these things, but yeah.
Well, because we've spoken about KD's versatility, obviously, right? And so the advantage, in a play like double drag, you can just stick KD in the corner as the decoy. Obviously, he can also be the on-ball guy. He can be in Chris Paul's role, or he could be in literally any 4 of the roles. He could roll to the basket like Ayton, he could pop out like Booker, or he could handle the ball like Chris Paul. But any one of those other 3 guys, like if you tried to stick Chris Paul in the corner and had KD on the ball, well, suddenly it's maybe not quite as effective because Chris Paul doesn't have the same sort of pull from the corner as a guy like Kevin Durant. And so it says something, again, about the way that Kevin Durant meshes so easily with this offense. And we've talked about it with Booker for years, the concept of him being a sacrificial superstar. KD is very much cut from the same cloth. The fact that he can come in and just instantly run these plays, and he's okay with taking a few possessions off, so to speak, in the fourth quarter where he is in the corner, and he's still going to see those balls come to him, and he's still going to get good shots off. Regardless, it just says a lot about who he is as a basketball player and a lot about his character. And in fact, so far in Kevin Durant's tenure with the Suns, he is down a full 8 touches per game from where he was pre-All-Star break with the Brooklyn Nets. He was averaging 68 with the Nets. He's at 60 per game with the Suns right now. By the way, if you're curious where Booker is on the season, Booker is at 63 on the season and also 63 in these past 3 games with Kevin Durant. So right now, the way the Suns are using them in the offense, it's not clear that there is any sort of 1A or 1B. They're basically touching the ball a completely equal amount. And yet, looking at those stats, and we know looking at what Kevin Durant achieved with the Nets in the first half of the season, he absolutely has another gear he could kick it into. Like, he could average 35 points per game. There's nothing necessarily stopping him. He could touch the ball another 10 or 15 times per game. He's just not, because that's the way the Suns are using him right now, and they're winning regardless, so who cares?
Well, interestingly, Durant on the season is averaging 29.7 points per game. That includes his time with the Nets. Just with the Suns, on a minutes restriction, as we all know, for most of the games that he's played. I think all of the games he's played so far, even if Monty ignored it for the Mavs game. He's averaging 26.8 points per game with the Suns. But on a permanent basis, meaning per 36, he's averaging the exact same amount of points on the Suns as he was on the Brooklyn Nets per 36. It's 29.7. So he's continuing to play essentially exactly the same. The big difference with his time on the Suns than his time on the Nets so far, and this is just a small sample size, so it's hard to really know how much this is going to translate because it's absurd, and that is that his true shooting percentage so far on the Suns is 72%, which is just, I mean, like, for somebody who takes jump shots, even a 6-game stretch of 72% true shooting is unheard of. He's having one of the most efficient scoring seasons of all time so far. But because he's touched the ball slightly less, because he's played slightly less minutes, and sort of the time that it's taking for them to continue to learn the offense with somebody with as much gravity and versatility as Kevin Durant, in order for him to maintain his basic scoring per minute, it's required him to score at an absurd true shooting percentage, which is 72%. It's kind of crazy to be able to watch Kevin Durant this much and really learn about his game and what he's capable of, because it's basically just everything. He can do everything. You know, in that OKC game, he had shots from the post. He hit a fadeaway Dirk-style shot. He had assists from the post. He was getting to the rim. He was drawing free throws. He was attacking in transition. He got a block in transition against SGA, which was just an absurd chase down block, which kind of sealed the game at the very end. It's just a guy that's so versatile and so capable of doing everything that, of course, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to change. Back to double drag, I just want to mention real quick, just to give Chris Paul a little credit here. The first 2 times they ran double drag that play against OKC, Chris Paul came flying around those screens, just sort of understanding that they're going to come off, because he knew how they were defending early in the game, understanding that they were going to come off Kevin Durant, and then the pass was right on the money to Kevin Durant both times. Durant had enough time to sink both of those threes. The third time they run it, knowing that Durant just had back-to-back threes, Chris Paul just slowed down a little bit around the initial Devin Booker screen, and then kind of flew around the DeAndre Ayton one, knowing that DeAndre Ayton needs a little bit more time to get his roll on towards the rim, because Ayton is a guy that's kind of a slow roller, effective roller, one of the best in the league, but kind of a slow roller. And of course, because Chris Paul is a basketball computer, they don't come off of Kevin Durant in the corner. That gives DeAndre Ayton enough time to get to the rim, and that's where the layup comes down. And, you know, as much as it takes time to figure out these guys and integrating them into the offense, what a luxury to have Chris Paul, the basketball computer, at the helm in scenarios like that, where the Suns' clutch offense finally looked pretty good, because it hasn't been that great so far this season.
Yeah, and just, you know, that pick and roll chemistry that he has with Ayton, we're blessed to be in this position where it's something they've done thousands of times at this point, and just makes it so much easier to incorporate KD into the offense. And again, just, you know, speaks to the value that Chris continues to bring to this team, which I think is not always recognized by Suns fans. There's one thing I do want to talk about out of this game that I thought was pretty interesting, and it's a very small sample size thing. We only saw about 2 minutes of it, but I want to give credit, first of all, to Kellen Olson. We did a playback of this game, and it was Kellen Olson, who was with us, who called it. He said, before the game started, he said, this is going to be the game where Monty tries out Kevin Durant at the 5. He did try out Kevin Durant at the 5. He was on the floor at the same time Ish Wainwright was next to him as the power forward, and it was kind of a very bizarre rotation in general. Monty again played a 12-man rotation, partially due to some foul trouble, but it was a 12-man rotation in this game, which ended up being a close game. We saw about 2 minutes of Durant at the 5, Mike, which is something you and I have also been begging to see. It's not much to go off of, but did you have any initial takeaways from that?
It's not the ideal version of what I'd like to see. I think that Kevin Durant has played small ball center, if I'm not mistaken, 3 times, and I think maybe just twice, actually, because the 2 memorable times are against the Mavs and against now in OKC. And the fact that neither of those times has had Devin Booker on the floor means I'm just not overly excited by it. I'd like to see some time with both of them on the floor together with Durant at the 5. And I think it's tough because you're trying to find ways to stagger those guys, have one of them on the floor the majority of the game, and also find minutes for DeAndre Ayton. And DeAndre Ayton, in order for him to close the game, you kind of end up with a scenario where Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton play most of the game together. So it's a little tough to find that. And I don't think they need to force it because DeAndre Ayton has been good against small ball lineups throughout his career. We saw it in the playoffs against the Clippers. There was some struggle against the Mavs, and I think if the Suns were playing the Mavs series with Kevin Durant instead of who they had, I imagine there would have been more small ball center in that game or in those games. But I guess I'm not overly impressed by it just yet. I'd like to see more of it with different players. There just hasn't been enough of a sample size to really see it get going.
Yeah, again, really small sample size, but I think different players is part of it and just different flow. It was kind of hard for them to establish a flow to the offense because I think you were pointing out on the stream, like KD hasn't played center a whole lot in his career. He's done it before for sure, but just wasn't able to instantly know where he should be on the floor at all times as if he was really playing the DeAndre Ayton role. It's not like the Suns were running their offense the same way as if DeAndre Ayton was on the floor. So it was kind of more like, okay, I'm Chris Paul, I have the ball, KD's going to come set a screen for me so that we can hope to generate a mismatch for him, and he can go into his ISO bag from, the high post, right? It was a lot of like ISO. Yeah. And again, we're talking about 4 possessions maybe out of the entire game. So we're like really, really nitpicking here. But just the way that it looked so far, it was kind of like, let's generate some mismatches for KD and he can go ISO. We know he can score that way. I'm confident that could yield a good offensive rating and be a good lineup, but it's also not exactly what we envisioned, I think. We're just going to have to see some more experimentation, but I hope Monty keeps going to it because I know I was leaning forward in my chair as soon as he broke it out last night, for sure.
4 games left. San Antonio, Denver, Lakers, Clippers. So, I mean, the only one that I could see them even trying it in is Clippers. And the idea that that game will matter both to the Suns and the Clippers is less likely, being that it's the last game of the season. Having said that, I will say that it might matter more for the Suns than the Clippers, being that the Suns are only going to have 7 total games with Durant to end the season with, 10 total if you include the initial first 3. So the Suns might still play Durant in that last game, even if they're locked in, just to get a little more time on the court with him. But I can see them running it against San Antonio, though, because San Antonio is not afraid to go small.
That would be amusing.
If they have to. Yeah, it just
I'm looking forward.
We wouldn't learn much from it. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to the San Antonio game tomorrow for sure, for a number of reasons. Against LA, they might obviously still play LA. Sorry, the Clippers. They might play the Clippers in the first round, so they might not want to. They might not want to show their cards.
Yeah, but it just would be nice to know that they have time together to do it. The fact that if they do it with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on the floor at the same time, that's just a good. It's nice to know that even if they haven't done it a lot together, it's still with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on the floor, meaning 2 guys that are just so capable of adjusting with short notice. Both of those guys are so good. In fact, I'll say this: Devin Booker and Kevin Durant have played 128 minutes together, and in those 128 minutes, the Suns are plus 58. So they're outscoring teams by 58 points in those 128 minutes. Just for reference, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant played 798 minutes together this season. And in those 798 minutes, which is like 6 times what the Suns played together so far, the Nets were plus 81. So barely different, You want to get a good chuckle? Mm-hmm. Do you have the data up in front of you? I don't, but I can find it if you want.
What are Luka and Kyrie together?
Oh, that should be pretty bad. I can look that up. Have you watched them at all? They're basically out, right? I mean,
they're basically out.
They could lose one more game and they're probably out.
We were watching the end of their game last night on the stream again on halftime, or during halftime of the Suns game, and that game was against Atlanta, and they're just thoroughly. Are they even mid? Or are they just worse than that? Are they like Atlanta is mid? Atlanta is historically a mid team at this point. They are historic levels of mid.
Well, they've been bad recently. Well, look at the difference in
Dallas
minutes played, by the way. Kyrie and Luka have played 409 minutes together. That just shows how little time
versus
it's
128
minutes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So 409 minutes.
And they're actually plus 33.
What? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for them,
plus
man.
33 in that time.
Good for them.
I am curious.
Luka is still probably going to Denver next season, but good for them. Good for you, Mark Cuban.
What are they going to do if Kyrie Irving leaves? That's going to be wild. And they're actually plus 55 in the minutes with Kyrie Irving on the floor and Luka off the floor.
So Luka's the problem.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah, maybe
I'm here to spread narratives. Let's get down to the dirt. Let's get filthy.
Yeah, I don't want. I can do a little more research into that, but what I would be curious of. You know what? I'm just gonna do it. Screw it. I'm curious. I'm too curious what it is. But like, I think the way to really figure out what the problem is start on February 9th, because that's when the trade happened, and we'd have to go until.
This is always a surefire way to kill like 5 or 10 minutes of a podcast. This is textbook
to do
lazy,
research well.
Textbook lazy podcasting here, folks, for the kids at home who want to grow up to be podcasters. This is not how you do it. But it is fun to poke fun at the Dallas Mavericks right now. Everyone else is doing it. So
well, we might as well do it now, because who knows what's going to happen later. It seems like they're going to be out of the playoffs, so like we can count on that pretty well. But yeah, let's see. Luka Doncic on the court, Kyrie Irving off the court since the trade. That's what I'm looking up. Do you have a guess? I'm guessing it's going to be in the negative based on the fact that they've lost so many games, but maybe it's not.
I will guess
minus 65.
Yep.
Luka on the court, Kyrie off the court since the trade. Yeah, so that's kind of crazy. I didn't fully anticipate that.
Doesn't look like MVP impact to me. That's for sure.
Let's talk about the CBA, because there has been quite a bit of news as of recently, and the basics of it is that the NBA and the Players Association reached a tentative deal on a new collective bargaining agreement on April 1st. Not an April Fool's joke; it was real.
Also came out at like 1 a.m. Eastern time. So
yeah,
total surprise.
And for those who haven't been following this closely, we have not talked about it much on the podcast, to be honest. And what could have happened is there could have been a lockout next season. There was a chance. The deadline to reach an agreement on the CBA was pushed back 3 times, and then this was the most recent deadline. And it looks like they have come to a deal. So it looks like there won't be any stoppage this summer or next season. And the interesting thing about the CBA, it has not yet been released. Right? So we can't read all of it yet. But what we do have is our reporters out there giving us little trickles of information about what's changed so far this season. And there's a lot. So I'd like to touch on basically all of the changes that we're aware of so far. Of course, I may miss some, but I tried to track down all of them so far. Some of them more relevant to the Suns than others, but all of them relevant to the entire NBA, because there are pretty big changes, I think.
If you follow the NBA, all of it should be at least a little interesting. I think there definitely is one thing that we'll probably spend the most amount of time talking about, which Suns fans I've noticed have been talking about the most. So we'll get there when we get there. But yeah. Did you have any initial reactions, just first off, before we get into the meat of it? Did you like these changes? Did you dislike?
I think we have to go into them individually to really talk about them. I like some of them. I don't like some of them. I think the reactions to some of them have been a lot more dramatic than I anticipated, but we'll cover that individually.
I co-sign that for sure.
One thing I will say is that I think we have different thoughts on which ones the reactions are more dramatic to, though. I didn't expect there to be a lockout. So the fact that they came to an agreement was not a surprise to me. That's the first thing I'll say. The NBA will introduce an in-season tournament likely next season. The first round of the tournament will be part of the regular season schedule, with the top 8 teams advancing to a single elimination event in December. And the final 4 of that tournament will be played at a neutral location, no home games, with Las Vegas being rumored as the first place for that to happen.
AKA, where can we squeeze the most gambling dollars out of this?
Yeah, the most money in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Las Vegas.
And this includes NBA teams initially having 80 regular season games on their schedule, with the leftover games, because it's still going to be an 82-game season, for the teams that don't make the single elimination portion of the in-season tournament to be scheduled at a later date. Well, the 2 teams that make the finals of the tournament would end up playing 83 games total. The prize for the tournament will be $500,000 per player, which means a lot more to some players than it will others.
Yeah,
I
can
imagine.
say that again.
Yeah, because for Ish Wainwright, that's the most money he's ever made in a season until next season. But for Devin Booker or Kevin Durant, doesn't mean much. But yeah, what do you think about the in-season tournament?
Yeah, I need to see it with my eyes before I really can be swayed to care. I think you were trying to sway me on the stream the other night, and I think you may have partially succeeded, and you were kind of phrasing it as what were the teams you used in the example? Do you remember? It was like, say the Kings.
I said, okay, here's what I said. People say, well, what if the best teams don't care about this? Okay, cool. Yeah, like maybe Golden State Warriors are like, who cares, we're about a ring. Maybe the Suns are a team that's like, who cares, we're all about a ring, even though the Suns want to win every game. That's just how they always have been, with Chris Paul at least. Say they don't care. Maybe they're knocked out early. They're not part of it. They rest guys. It's a regular season game. They treat it as a normal regular season game. They don't try any harder. But say young teams try. And the 2 teams I use an example is, say this tournament happens. It's a single elimination tournament. And all of a sudden the final game is Sacramento versus OKC. Now, that may not seem overly exciting to everyone listening. But my question to you, Sam, was... would you watch that game? And you said you would. And then I said, but would you watch that game if it was just a regular season game? And
exactly.
you said no.
I know. I'm giving you credit for that, okay? As a fan of the NBA, yes, I would be more likely to watch this version of that game where you assign arbitrary value to it. Yeah. That's me, a more or less diehard fan of the NBA, I think we can say, versus the casual. I mean, keep in mind... The point I was trying to make, keep in mind, this is all happening during December. This is the height of the NFL season. Like, if the NBA thinks that they'll be able to push these games out, whether it's NCAA single elimination style or not, and compete in the TV ratings with, say, the NFL, they're delusional, frankly. So, I don't think this is going to be something that saves the NBA regular season. I think there's still going to be a lot of people. There's still going to be a lot of discourse about how huge portions of the NBA regular season are still meaningless and yada, yada, yada. But I can appreciate that they're trying something. I need to see it with my own eyes before I really can be brought to care. And I think most people feel the same way. I can't speak for them, but I could guess.
I mean, with a single elimination schedule, a team that wins the finals of that will be a team that's on a win streak. And that'll be fun to watch to me, because anytime
I think what you
a win streak is put to test is fun.
I think what you should do is, if you go into that, how many teams are in that bracket? 8? It's the top 8 teams. Mm-hmm, each successive team that you beat from then on, you should be able to pluck one player from their roster and add them to your playoff roster.
And to be fair, the $500 or $500,000.
$500,000 is whack.
It's the thing I like the least about it. I just don't care. Yeah, like, who cares if the players make?
But now imagine that you're OKC and you beat Sacramento, and okay, now you go on like business as usual. But now it's the first round of the playoffs, and you can call up Sacramento again and say, "Send us De'Aaron Fox," and he has to go. That's what I would bargain for personally. I don't think the Players Association would sign off on it, but I think it would be a lot more fun.
The way that most people have been, and this is just my opinion. If you don't care, it's fine if you don't care. Not you, Sam, but anyone listening. If you don't care, Sam, I'm going to bug you about it. But most people who don't like this are often comparing it to a championship and comparing the value of it to a championship. And okay, fine. It's going to matter less than a championship. Yes, that's very true. But what it should be compared to is regular season games. Is it going to matter more than regular season games? And the answer is yes. And it's not necessarily about the $500,000 per player. It is just an arbitrary thing that the NBA just made up. But the fact that it has some value in that the games are going to be broadcast. And by the way, you're talking about the height of the NFL season. I would not be surprised if they put the championship, quote unquote, championship game on the weekend of like their All-Star game. I forget what the NFL All-Star game is called. The Pro Bowl?
The Rose
is that right?
Bowl.
The one
Bowl,
nobody
yes.
watches?
Yes.
Yeah, the one. They might just put it on that day and just be like, yeah, nobody cares about the NFL this day, so let's put it in an
NFL players
NBA
would
game.
rather be like golfing than playing that.
They'd probably rather watch the, Magic Johnson tournament championship game or whatever they're going to call this tournament. That's just what it's going to be.
They'd rather watch the pickleball slam on ESPN.
Yeah. The question is it going to be more fun than a regular season game? And I think there's a chance that it will be for at least a few of the games. And that's really, to me, I'll probably end up watching as much as I possibly can, whereas I may not have done that in the regular season. So for me, I'm excited. And I choose to be optimistic about it. It's possible it'll suck, but I'm choosing to be optimistic about it. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think we can move on.
Okay.
We got a lot to cover here.
This is the one I
CBA
think that... We'll talk about the second tax apron. And I'll just read this. It's quite a bit. And I think we're going to have to touch on each part of it here. The NBA's current tax apron is set a few $1 million above the luxury tax line. For example, the luxury tax line in this season is $150 million approximately, and the tax apron is approximately $157 million. So it's like about $6.5 million more. Teams above the tax apron aren't permitted to acquire players via sign and trade, use more than the taxpayer portion of the mid-level exception, or use the biannual exception. In the new CBA, the NBA will implement a second tax apron that will be $175 million. I'm sorry, it's $17.5 million above the tax line, which is still approximately about $170 million, depending on what the tax line is next season, because it goes up every season. Teams above that second apron will face a new set of restrictions, which include not having access to the taxpayer mid-level exception, not being able to trade first-round picks 7 years down the road, which is something the Suns just did. They won't be allowed to sign free agents on the buyout market. They won't be permitted to send out cash in trades, also something the Suns just did. And they won't be able to take back more salary in a trade than they send out. Another thing the Suns just did in order to get Kevin Durant. And then the final part of this report is that one of the reporters said that these changes will be eased in. I think it was, I forget who it was. I don't want to credit to the wrong person. So it's unclear whether or not these restrictions will all take place, because the new CBA starts next season. So they could have just started all these changes next season. But because there's about 5-6 teams that this will be impact, and including the Suns, they're not going to implement it all right away. So just to recap the things: no TPMLE, no ability to trade first-round picks 7 years down the road, no buyout players, no ability to send out cash in trades, and any trade that they make can be equal value or less value. No trades where you take back more salary than you have. A lot of stuff to placate owners like Robert Sarver, who are gone, who is gone, and that don't want to spend money.
A lot of technical stuff in there, though. So I just want to make sure people kind of understand. Just in general, the highest spending teams there are just going to have fewer tools at their disposal to continue to add talent beyond the soft cap that is the NBA salary cap, and more towards the restrictions that you would see in leagues like the NFL, where you have a hard cap. That's not to say that these teams would be literally hard capped at that level of the tax apron, that they could add no talent, but that they won't have these built-in exceptions. And like you said, the mid-level exception is the one that I think fans most commonly refer to and are most aware of because they see examples of it every single year. There's also the biannual exception that we talk about and other exceptions, just other ways to add talent if you are a contending team and continue to attract talent in free agency, also through the buyout market, on the trade market through trade exceptions. A lot of this stuff is going to be going away for teams above a certain spending amount. So yeah, in the past, none of this would have affected the Suns because Robert Sarver was owner. That all potentially.
In fact, it would.
It's the
type of change and rule change that somebody like Robert Sarver would have pushed for and likely did. Because Robert Sarver was involved with a lot of these negotiations. They took years, and it's like sort of antithetical to what somebody like Matt Ishbia would, which is that his money is a competitive advantage, and in this case, it tries to take away the competitive advantage that a lot of money invested into a team provides. So, one thing I will say, just to help clarify, because people are probably questioning and wondering, how does this impact the Suns? The Suns' top 6 salaries next year alone add up to $153 million. Basically, almost $154 million. You add in Ish Wainwright, that's about $2 million more. That includes getting rid of Darius Baisley and Saban Lee, which I assume they would do. Right, so that's just Kevin Durant. Guys, that's just Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, DeAndre, and Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, and Cameron Payne. Those are the players that are under contract. Ish Wainwright, I think you could just include that he's going to be part of the Suns next year, so you can probably throw his in there and just assume that that's because it's a team option, I believe. And I think the Suns are going to pick that up because it's just a small salary for a player that can get minutes. The thing about that is, next year is the last year of Devin Booker's rookie extension. After that, his Supermax kicks in, and that max is $50 million. So he's making $36 million in 23-24. In 24-25, he makes $50 million, and it only goes up from there, 50 to 54 to 58. Now, will the cap rise? Yes. There's a combination of there's new basketball-related income that's going to be included. I think I will cover that. I can't remember if I put it on my list of things to cover. Mm-hmm. And then also a new TV deal that'll come down. I think in 25-26 will be the first year that new TV deal will come down in. So all of these things, it's a $17 million is on top of the normal cap. It's all going to be a complicated equation that all of us will rely on David to help talk us through. Hopefully he's still doing it at that point. But the point is, the most likely scenario is maybe there's a chance that next season this doesn't have a big impact on the Suns. The combination of Devin Booker's new salary not kicking in yet, plus the sort of smoothing that they're doing to not kick in 1 year. But 24-25, this is probably going to have some impact on the Suns, and there's still a good chance that it has an impact on the Suns next season. It also could have an impact on teams like OKC. I mentioned this when we were watching that game last night. If all of a sudden they have multiple guys that are trying to sign max offers after they already signed SGA, it's going to be tougher to keep when they start drafting all of these star players. Like, say, Josh Giddey, Chet, and Jalen Williams all want a max, and they already have SGA on a max, not going to be able to do it. I think they're probably just going to be stuck with not being able to do all of that.
Well, so they'd be able to do it. They would just have to, there would be more concessions on the back end for doing it. And I think that's
it'd be a lot harder to build a team around it.
Sure, but I think, at its core, teams like OKC are the ones that are pushing for these reforms. More so than anyone else. Because the small market teams, the ones that otherwise can't compete, this is my problem with some of the criticism here, right? Is that Matt Ishbia might be the spender that Robert Sarver was not. This might have some short-term level or intermediate-term level impact on the Suns over the next 4 or 5 years. However, if we kind of take a longer-term view of this, the Suns are not going to be constantly in the second tier of the tax apron or whatever every single season. Matt Ishbia just isn't that type of spender. These rules were not designed for the Phoenix Suns. Like, let's not flatter ourselves. These rules were designed for the Los Angeles Lakers, the Golden State Warriors, teams that are very, very much more frequently huge. Yeah, teams that are spenders to that level that we're just not, and that definitely teams like OKC or Charlotte or San Antonio at the bottom definitely are not. So a lot of those small market teams, I think, are applauding these efforts to, in general, make things more equitable. Now, you could criticize them from the other side, saying that that's because they're not really interested in spending. in like properly funding their investments. Maybe there is something to that. But this notion that like this is uniquely negatively affecting the Suns is just not true. You know, it's kind of
the timing sucks for the Suns fans.
The timing sucks. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. The timing sucks, but it's long term. We're not going to be affected by this as much as the Lakers are, as much as the Warriors are, as much as the Knicks are, as much as the Bulls, the Heat. There are many teams that are going to be more affected by this than the Suns are. It's kind of like if you ask like a small business owner or like a 6-figure earner in Silicon Valley, like who says, I don't want my taxes raised, or like we shouldn't raise taxes on billionaires because then I'll have to pay more taxes. And they're like a small business owner, right? That's what a lot of Suns fans sound like complaining about this right now. Like, it's like, you're not even in the conversation. The Phoenix Suns were not the reason that these rules were implemented. But they won't be frequently. They won't be frequently, and they won't be
not anymore.
They won't be negatively impacted more than the Lakers or the Warriors or all of these teams that we should like care more about bringing those teams back to our level. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. Again, I'm not saying it won't have any impact on the Suns, but like the idea that this is some disastrous thing for the Suns, it's just not. To me, it's just not.
I wouldn't call it disastrous, and I think the point about it, the negative impacts that are going to be applied to the Suns will also be applied to the Warriors and the Clippers and the Lakers. It's true in that the playing field is relatively evened there. But it's just real bad timing. It would have been nice to have a few seasons where the Suns were able to benefit from the same benefits that teams like the Clippers and the Warriors were able to benefit from. And the Warriors got.
Yeah, and
the Suns can't. That's the part that sucks.
Yeah, this is a move that is designed to nullify dynasties. Like the NBA doesn't want dynasties, otherwise they wouldn't implement these rules. Yeah. I don't know how else to say it. Like, what? Sorry, what'd you say?
It's a good point. Yeah, maybe they haven't fully thought through.
It's still
the impact of this is going to be.
It's still going to be possible, but you need to absolutely nail every one of your veteran minimum signings. And here's another thing that James Jones, if he hasn't already woken up to this sobering prospect, he will have to soon. You need to take the draft seriously now. With these rules. If these rules are going to affect the Suns at their level of spending and they're only going to be able to afford, their 2, 3, 4-star players all next to each other, the rest of the roster, you need to nail your veteran minimum signings and you need to take the draft seriously because all of a sudden, maybe in the past when you were drafting in the teens or the 20s or whatever, it was kind of easy to punt on some of these picks by telling yourself, oh, these aren't going to be superstars. These aren't going to be future all-star level players anyway. Well, now you're thinking every single one of these draft picks could turn into that bench depth that we need to propel ourselves to another championship, right. to buy us some time, be the cheap rookie 2 or 4 year contracts that we need to extend what could potentially become a dynasty run. And every franchise is maybe going to be potentially thinking about their late first round and second round draft picks more in that way now. The Suns definitely have not been taking the prospect of scouting seriously over the past several years. It's just a fact. They may be forced into a position now where they really have to take into consideration each and every one of their picks. Of course, they don't have as many picks in the upcoming decade because of the Kevin Durant trade, but they still will have some, and they need to take those some seriously.
Part of the tax line was that it was calculated at the end of the season, and the fact that this includes not signing free agents on the buyout market, I imagine we're going to have to figure out more details about when that tax calculation is made in order to understand whether or not the Suns will be eligible for players like Terrence Ross, like they got in the buyout market this year. Because right now, in the scenario that we're looking at, there's a possibility in the future they couldn't get players like Terrence Ross. So it'll be interesting to see. David can help us. Keith Smith, that's his name, right? Is somebody that I do recommend following as well because he does a great job of writing about this kind of thing. And people like him who are able to sort of translate this into better language for us will help. As far as how this impacts the Suns this season, it doesn't. And as it comes next season, as we start to understand it, we will do our best to try to explain how it could impact the Suns in future seasons. So hopefully not much in the next season at least. All NBA and postseason award voting. 2 key changes will impact voting in postseason awards beginning in 23-24. Players will need to appear in a minimum of 65 games to be eligible for MVP, Rookie of the Year, All NBA, and maybe even some conditions attached to some of the minimum games requirements. Maybe that's rest related. And the other part is the 3 all-NBA teams will be positionless going forward. What are your thoughts on the minimum games requirement and or the positionless all-NBA teams?
The positionless stuff is a no-brainer. Great idea. I know a lot of people have been pushing for that for years. I think it's great. Now you can have any combination of various positions. You know, you're not in a position where you have to put Jokic first team All-NBA and Embiid second team or whatever, and that's just one example. So, yep, I think it's a great idea. The 65-game minimum, I would have pushed for a little bit less, like maybe 55 to 60. 65 just feels a little bit high to me, especially if you look at a season like this one where so many guys have been out.
Yeah.
There are gonna be so many superstar level players who have had fantastic seasons who are going to end this season with 57 or 58 games played. Devin Booker, of course, being one of them, but there are many, many more. So, yeah, I don't know. 65 feels a little bit high to me, but I don't think it's the end of the world either, because at the end of the day, you're rewarding guys not necessarily for being these are the top. Like, if you're voting for All-NBA, it's not about these are the top 15 players in the league in a vacuum, as much as, in theory, here we are rewarding the 15 players who have had, in sum, the best season for the NBA. And those are slightly different concepts. So most of the time, the guy who plays 68 games is going to win out in the voting over the guy who plays 56 games, even if the guy who plays 56 games is a better player, right? We see that, I think, 98% of the time. So again, I don't think it's a huge deal, but I maybe would have pushed for a little bit less.
Do you think that rest was a problem in the NBA this year?
Yes, but I don't blame that on the players. I think that's a decision made by the franchises who are concerned with the playoffs and their training staffs. And I think too much of the blame goes towards the players directly for those decisions. But yeah,
I just don't think it was a problem this year. Was like how many games was it really a problem? I don't know. NBA
fans, first of all, if you're a diehard NBA fan right now, you should know better than to buy tickets. You should always check. Like if you're scrounging up your savings and you know you're only going to go to one NBA game this year, or you live hours away and it's going to take you hours to get to the nearest NBA arena, like if you're me, where it takes me 3.5 hours just to get to the nearest NBA city and go see a game, right? You should always check the schedule ahead of time and see if one of the two teams or even both of them are on a back-to-back. And then you should not buy tickets to that game with the way the league currently is. If you want to see star players, you should not go see back-to-backs. If you're a diehard NBA fan... Go ahead.
I just think the 65 games is I don't like this at all. I think the idea of going to positionless, the idea of going to an all-NBA team that's positionless, is that you're trying to reward the 15 best players in the NBA that season. And then adding a minimum number of games cap is antithetical to that, in my opinion. It's just the opposite of that. Now we're no longer trying to reward the 15 best players in the NBA that season. We're trying to reward the 15 best NBA players that played that season that also meet these other criteria. And look, I think that the voters have done a perfectly fine job deciding when players have played not enough games or whatever they want to say, the right number of games in order to make these teams. This season is a great example, just as you mentioned. Steph Curry would be ineligible. Devin Booker would be ineligible. Mm-hmm. You know, if you want to make Damian Lillard ineligible because he was held out of the last 14 games of the season or whatever it's going to end up being, voters can do that. We're capable of doing that. I think we have done that pretty well in the era of rest. And I'm just not a huge fan of it because I don't think that it's going to fully reflect. There will be seasons as a result of this number that won't reflect the best players in the NBA of that season. And while that won't matter in the short term, 20 years from now, when you look back at the All-NBA teams and people who actually do that, it's not going to be a great representation of the season, in my opinion. So I'm just not a huge fan of it.
The commissioner's office, the NBA is mad that they have customers, hard-paying customers who they hope to convert into like diehard fans but are not yet diehard fans, right? Are leaving negative reviews of this league because they're showing up to games and saying, why the hell am I watching Marcus Morris instead of Kawhi Leonard right now, right? It's like something that is happening. I pinpointed the Clippers because there's been so much about load management with them specifically, but it is to an extent happening all over the league. The NBA is trying to figure out a solution to that problem. I don't think punishing the players specifically for that is the answer, but I think that's where the source of frustration comes from. Is that
It's
this
just
is something
more
that
that
people
problem
care
is
about.
more injuries.
It might
Injuries.
not be something that you care about, but it is something that a lot of casual fans of the NBA care about. They're saying, why the hell am I going to these useless games in the middle of the
But how many
regular
games
season?
are those? I mean, really?
10%?
It's more
maybe?
of what, like Kawhi? No, it's not 10%. 10% there's a player
5%?
resting. Maybe 5%. The issue still, and I know you agree with this, is the schedule then. That's really the problem. Because we're trying
fuck
to.
it, dude. I
what's
would
more
eliminate-
important? These players playing in the playoffs, or these players playing on the second night of a back-to-back, where 10% of the fans of that arena is going to be mad that they went to that game? I don't know.
I've been saying for years that's why I don't give a shit if they just eliminate all the back-to-backs and go to like a 72-game schedule. And then if you want to stick a they won't, because they don't want to give up their
money,
proportional
yeah.
cut of the income. I get it, but like personally, I would not mind that. Just give me no back-to-backs. It is a worse product. It is a worse product for everyone.
Yeah,
It is what it is.
I'm not overly upset about the 65-game thing. I just think that, to me, awards have become less and less important the more I learn about the NBA. And that will just add to the pile of them being less important to me than, maybe the barbershop conversations are better than I realized as far as capturing what mattered about the NBA, the people that really, really watched it compared to the awards. Some salary cap changes. I'll just fly through these real quick. The cap will increase by no more than 10% per league year in order to avoid a repeat of the 32% spike in 2016. So they're trying to avoid a Kevin Durant scenario. And this will, just so everyone knows, the BRA basketball-related income is split 50-50. If the total amount of BRA is above a 10% increase, they usually just split that extra money evenly. That's what they proposed in the past. So we'll see if that happens. The value of the mid-level exception will receive a 7.5% increase. And the room exception will be increased by 30%. So some exceptions that we understood in the past, those will go up a little bit. We'll talk about those numbers as we get them in the future. The luxury tax brackets, previously at $5 million intervals above the tax line, will increase at the same rate of the salary cap. Nothing too interesting there, just that for some reason they would change the tax line in $5 million increments instead of it being proportional to the cap. Now they'll make it proportional to the cap, which will make it a little harder to understand, but once the numbers are locked in, they're locked in. And a new cap exception will be introduced for second-round picks so that teams don't need to use cap room or the mid-level exception to give players salaries worth more than the rookie minimum. So that's kind of cool, something I didn't realize was happening. But basically, if you want to sign a second-round pick, you have an exception for that now. It doesn't need to be cap room. Any thoughts on any of those?
Maybe that'll be our answer, is to just load up on second-round picks, and that's how we continue the dynasty. Just plug them in around Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. No, I mean, I don't have any crazy thoughts. Just you can kind of see in some of that, like the NBA Players Association, with what we were talking about earlier, this concept of eliminating the mid-level exception for some high-spending teams. The Players Association would never agree to these measures that are, in theory, deflationary, that are taking money out of the total pool that's going to all players. On one end of the spectrum, if there wasn't a counterbalance, a counterweight to it on the other side, and that's where you're seeing some of these increases in the room exception and some of these other figures, some of these other additional exceptions to the lower end of the spectrum. It's all about just trying to make the league more equitable. Whether you agree that that's a good thing or not is your own decision to make at home, but that's where all this stuff comes from. It's going to be the same amount of money split between all the players at the end of the day. Otherwise, the Players Association would have been up in arms.
A few more things. Teams will be permitted to carry 3 players on two-way contracts, which is kind of cool. I'll call that a COVID rule. Players signing a veteran contract extension will receive a 140% bump to their salary instead of 120%, so they can make more on contract extensions, which is another.
That's a cool one. That I
think it's a concession to try to keep. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot more contract extensions as of late as there was in the past, and I think in the future you'll see even more because there's a 20% increase on what it could be. Players will be permitted to sign rookie scale extensions of up to 5 years instead of 4 even if the extension is worth less than the max. So that would be an example of DeAndre Ayton could have signed a 5-year deal with the Suns as an extension. It'll help with restricted free agency negotiations, I imagine, instead of just a 4, even if it's not a max. So that's kind of cool. The qualifying offer amount for restricted free agents will increase by 10% over its usual scale amount. Another option that gives restricted free agents a little more, I would say, leeway, including like reducing the total amount of time for a team to decide from 48 hours to 24 hours. It was 48 hours previously, as we knew with the Suns. They did it in 3 minutes or whatever, but now it's only a day.
Yep.
Teams will no longer face restrictions on how many players it has on designated rookie or designated veteran contracts. That is an OKC. That is an OKC rule because they have 15 picks over the next 3 drafts, I imagine, and that's all for the contract-related stuff. Any thoughts on any of those? We can go through the rest of them. I want to cover all of them because I have everything so far, so I have a few more, but do you have any thoughts on those?
I'm impressed you have all the details here. I didn't expect you to have them.
I mean, this shout out to hoopsrumors.com that had a running list. That's where I stole all these from. So
dude, Hoops Rumors, I don't know who runs that site. Honestly, I don't. But they have been at it for over a decade. Like, I remember when I was in middle school. I'm talking 12, 13 years ago when I was first getting into the league. I would use Hoops Rumors. So they aggregate a ton of great stuff.
Yeah, they did a good job on this one.
Sam Presti has got to be a happy man. I would just have to.
I think a lot of these are OKC. He must have had a lot of negotiation stake in this. Draft-related stuff. Players who participate in the draft combine will be required to undergo physical exams, and then those results will be distributed to select teams where the player is projected to be drafted. So kind of an interesting thing that they've never done before. And they're not changing the one-and-done rule. So no direct out of high school drafts after all. That was something that people thought would happen. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on those ones? Those are the only draft changes we know so far.
I don't like the NCAA as like as a governing body, but I also don't mind. Like I would have been wary personally of drafting players out of high school myself if I were in charge of a scouting department, because I have no idea. Right. We're already not scouts to begin with, but I have no idea how to evaluate film of a high school player. I just don't know how the hell you're supposed to do it when they're not even on close to an even playing field from night to night. You don't know what sort of talent they're playing against. I just don't know how you're supposed to do it. So for me, the answer has always been fix the NCAA and pay the players, rather than necessarily just let players come out of high school. But I don't think it's easy either way. What do you think about that one?
I think the fact that the NBA provides a path to the NBA that is not college related, that makes them a little bit of money, makes it worthwhile. The fact that players can make
Ignite is still cool. That exists.
Yeah, and the fact that players can make money in college now based on their likeness, I think makes me feel a little better about it. You know, they're no longer just sort of this weird servitude of the NCAA for 1 year.
Yeah, but they still kind of are.
Yeah, I mean, but it's better. It's better now, right? You can make money off of jersey sales. You can make money off of video game likenesses and things like that. And you can sign some endorsement deals. That all of that together, I think, helps a little bit with like the top prospects that were the ones that were getting cheated the most. Mm-hmm. Miscellaneous changes here. This is how they have it labeled. Players will no longer be tested for marijuana use.
Oh yeah, this is a funny one.
The players clearly wanted it.
It's about
legal
time.
in most of the states that the NBA teams are in, so it makes sense. You know, at the very least, they travel through those states.
I think teams are still going to ask about it, and they're still, whether it's right or wrong, they're still going to have their own opinions on it, right?
Yeah.
You would have to assume behind the scenes. I don't personally care, and I think, this is great for the players. Let them do what they want. Legalize all drugs.
Either. Yeah, I don't care either.
I didn't say the last part.
Players will be allowed to invest in NBA and WNBA franchises via a private equity firm selected by the Players Association, meaning players can now be involved in ownership groups, including of teams that they are not playing on. How do you feel about that one?
This is called the fast track LeBron to an NBA franchise rule, is what this one is. Which, fine. But he was going to own one anyway. And now he'll probably own one by 2026. And it'll be great. Maybe he'll even be playing.
I have a thought on that one, but it's related to the next one as well, and I want to cover them both here. Players will be allowed to promote or invest in companies involved with sports betting and cannabis. However, any involvement with sports betting companies will require complete separation, in quotes, from the gambling component. Now, I understand why people are freaking out about this, and this is one that I think people are being maybe a little overly dramatic about. Now, let me just quickly say about these two things. Ownership of an NBA team and money from gambling. Those are two things that owners were allowed to make money off of that are based on the athletes playing their sport that the athletes were not allowed to make money from. And from a Players Association negotiation standpoint, they said there are things that owners can make money from that players are not allowed to make money from that is entirely based on what they're doing on the court, and that is gambling and owning a team. And the Players Association negotiated from the standpoint of these guys who are the ones that are risking their bodily harm should be allowed to make money from this stuff as well. People saying that the idea of a player showing up in a gambling commercial or being involved with a gambling company could make the product less, believable. I don't know how they want to say it. Maybe tainted, or there could be ethical problems.
Tainted is a word. Yeah, I think that might be the word.
I understand where they're coming from, but I think from the perspective of they're making money off of them playing games, why are the players not allowed to make that money? It makes sense to me. Now, is there a way to do it completely separate from the gambling component? I'm not sure. I know endorsement deals are pretty easy, right? We'll give you $10 million to show up in this commercial for the next 2 years. That's an easy one, right? That's not related to how much money they win and lose in the gambling part. It's just money. That part's easy. As far as investing in the companies, that seems like that money would be directly related to the gambling component, and I'm interested to know more about how they're going to try to separate that.
There's a boom in the gambling industry right now. We're not dumb. We all see it. We run, ads on our own podcast, and you hear them on every podcast. I don't think there's anything wrong with the players wanting to get a slice of that pie. It's just where the gambling industry concerns me a little bit as it relates to the NBA and the two marrying each other is just more so in terms of fan conduct that you see at games these days, and how crazy everyone's going about their parlays and gambling. And that's what, to me, maybe taints the product a little bit, is when you have people sitting courtside. Yes. I don't blame the players at all, but it's fans sitting courtside harassing players because, they only made 2 threes in that game instead of 3. And now that player is going to miss out on their $80 parlay or whatever. That's the stuff that's a little bit more tainted to me. I'm not saying that means it shouldn't exist. Gamblers, I'm not coming after you. I'm fine with gambling. I dabble in it myself from time to time. But that's the stuff that really concerns me about sometimes, oh shit, we're going to get another Malice at the Palace, because there's going to be a player who just flips his shit and goes, just completely goes after some asshole in the stands one of these days. It would not shock me. So, but that has nothing to do with the player's ability to make money off the industry in a way that is separated. I think that's fine.
I'll boil my thoughts on it down to this. The idea of a player potentially fixing a game, that could happen right now. It could just happen right now. What makes it more likely that we're going to have a gambling, disaster in the NBA, some sort of scandal that's gambling related? What makes that more likely is gambling being legal in all of the states that it's legal in now. It's not the players being connected to the gambling companies, I think. It's just the fact that it could happen. I think the refs are the bigger targets than the players.
There we go. There it is. I was waiting for you to say it. What's more likely than the players is let's investigate Scott Foster.
Let's investigate the guys that aren't millionaires. Yeah, the guys that don't have a massive spotlight on them.
Let's start there. Yeah, and the guys who, exactly, do not have a massive spotlight on them and are just never investigated.
Right.
Start there.
And so, to me, if you believe that there's a chance that games could be fixed in the future, there's no reason to not believe that same thing now. And maybe you're just concerned trolling a little bit. I'm personally just not as... I don't think it impacts the game as negatively as a lot of people do. I was surprised at the at the idea of that, because the other solution to this is players are not allowed to make money from the people betting on them playing, and I understand how that is ethically weird, but to me it's also ethically weird that owners can own these sports books, like we have a sports book in the arena for the Suns that owners make money directly from, that the players are not allowed to have any cut of. That's weird to me. People are betting on the players. It's just a weird ethical thing for me. So I guess I fall into a little different camp than I think what I saw the majority of people think on that one. And look, if it ends up in a massive gambling scandal in the future, I'll eat some crow at that point, but I'm not as worried about it at this point.
Which NBA player would be most likely to join forces with Scott Foster and form a gambling ring, an illegal gambling ring?
That is a good question. It would have to be like a B tier star that maybe isn't on a great team that wants to find a way to make more money. Someone like Bradley Beal or somebody like that.
Wow.
Or
coming after Bradley
Damian
Beal.
Lillard. He doesn't care about a championship anymore, right?
Someone who doesn't care about a championship and someone who doesn't mind being the heel a little bit. I feel like Damian Lillard might be that.
Nah, they're too rich. I don't think any of these guys will do that, for the record. Last one, team and league licensing revenue will be added to the NBA basketball-related income for the first time. So that's stuff like the logos being licensed to, Ruffles or or video games and stuff like that. That can be directly, that'll add to the cap as early as next year. And that's $160 million from this year.
I don't know how much of a difference that realistically makes.
So it'll be $80 million because they split it 50-50. It was $160 million the NBA made this year from licensing revenue. And that'll be split directly in half of it given to the players, half of it going to the owners. So that'll be $80 million added to the cap as early as next year if it's a similar amount. So it has a pretty big, and that's split between all 30 teams. So it has a pretty big impact, a few $1 million for each team.
That's it.
Not bad. We covered them all.
That was a lot of shit.
It's a lot. I'm sorry. I wanted to cover all of it that we understand right now. People were asking for it, and I have thoughts on all of it. That's the other part, and I knew you would as well. So that's all we got for now, and we'll know more later. This is the last podcast. We're going long, and we're already going long, but this is the last podcast that we're going to record for our main feed before the season ends. And I just want to quickly touch on the 4 most likely and potentially 5 most likely opponents for the Suns. And let's just quickly say who I think we would want to see the most. Clippers, Warriors, Lakers, who have been playing very well, Pelicans, who have also been playing very well, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are 4-6 in their last 10. The most likely opponent is the Clippers, but the Warriors are tied with them. The Clippers still have a few road games left. The Warriors are getting Andrew Wiggins back, supposedly relatively soon. Clippers, Warriors, Lakers, Pelicans, Wolves. I think we can both agree that the Wolves is the team we would want the most, right?
Correct.
But they're the least likely to be the Suns' opponent at this point. So
correct.
I think we can almost rule them out. So out of the other 4 teams, Clippers, Warriors, Lakers, Pelicans, who's the team that stands out as a team that you would want to hold on to that 5 spot, assuming the Suns keep the 4?
Yeah, man, I guess let's run it back against the Pelicans. I think it's funny that there are 3 of these 4 teams we have existing, I don't know if you'd call it beef, but just there's history with a lot of these teams. And I think the difference with the Pelicans is all of it is under the assumption that Zion does not return. If Zion does return, that would make a very big difference in how I think about them, because when Zion plays, I have a ton of respect for the Pelicans. They are playing very well recently, but there is just a talent gap between Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum-led team versus Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. And I think everyone sees it, and it's very obvious. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't be scrappy. And that doesn't even mean that they couldn't, take a couple games off the Suns. But I would feel pretty good about that matchup. And I guess, if I had to choose between any of the 4, give me the New Orleans Pelicans.
I'll take the Lakers in round 1, the Nuggets in round 2, the Clippers in round 3, and the Bucks in the finals. Let's run it back. I want to do it exactly the same. Give the Suns another chance to do it. I want to do it exactly the same. Yeah, and I want to do it with Kevin Durant this time, and that's how I want it to go. But yeah, no, I think the Clippers, I think, was probably the team I would pick at this point being that they're not playing very well right now and Paul George may still be injured. If Zion comes back, the Pelicans still scare me. The Lakers are genuinely good right now. People don't want to admit it that are Suns fans yet, but they're playing really well lately, and they still have LeBron James. And the Warriors are the Warriors, so I got to pick the Clippers out of that group. That's where I stand. I will say, just from a basketball NBA standpoint, LeBron versus KD in round one, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Dude, the
it's pretty
ratings,
cool, man. They've never
know.
played in the playoffs against each other except in the finals, so that'd be pretty cool.
I know it's not cool to be like a simp for TV ratings or whatever, because like, what does it matter to us? We're not making the money, but like the ratings would be insane. Everyone would be watching, and it's a first round series, and like every single eyeball would be on that. It would just be pretty cool to be at the center of that. I'm not sure we've had that experience. Even in the finals, by virtue of the fact that it was small market team or mid-size market team versus mid-size market team, I don't know. It kind of felt like, yes, people were watching that finals, but it also felt like a lot of people in the community were sort of just tuning us out. And no one would be able to tune out a LeBron versus KD series first round. It would attract absolutely everyone on the face of planet Earth who remotely calls themselves a basketball fan, which would be kind of cool.
Things change every day with the standings, and we'll be back with a Patreon podcast midweek to cover it at that time, either Wednesday or Thursday. Those are the most likely days. We got a few games this week still, the rest of the season, including a Spurs game tomorrow for most of you, today for some of you watching. Hopefully the Suns just dispatch with the Spurs, who have been kind of playing spoilers for some teams lately. And then they finish off the season against Denver and the two LA teams. Excited. This has been a very bizarre season, but it ends on a very exciting note with Kevin Durant playing. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you'd like to listen to that Patreon podcast, you can join at patreon.com/thetimeline. For $6 a month, you listen to extra podcasts. For as little as $3 a month, you can join our Discord where we have lots of fun. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we will be back soon.